He was, relatively young. Kaka-60 pa lang niya, at marami pang gustong gawin rin. Ka-text ko siya nung isang araw at sabi nga niya sana pagbisita ko siya. That was Sunday. Hindi umabot yung pagbisita ko.
No words can express how broken our hearts are and how long it will take for us to accept the reality that he is gone. Mission accomplished, Kanoy. Be happy now with Dad and Mom.
Sa tamang pamamahala, gaganda ang buhay ng lahat. At sa buhay na maganda, sino pa ang gugustuhin bumalik sa panahon ng pang-aapi? Kung kasama ko kayo, may tataguyod natin ang isang bayan kung saan pantay-pantay ang pagkakataon. Dahil pantay-pantay nating ginagampanan ang ating mga pananagutan. Kayo ang boss ko. Kaya maaaring hindi ako makinig sa mga utos ninyo.
The passing of former President Benigno Aquino III, or Pinoy, recalled his work towards progress, democracy, and peace, and his integrity and decency beyond his flaws. As the Philippines is preparing for the 2022 presidential elections, what qualities will they require when they elect their next president? And how will they remember Pinoy? We discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to this special edition of The Chiefs. I'm Robbie Alampay. Also with me online is Ed Lingao of One News Book.
Hi, Robbie.
Good evening. And I think by this time, people understand and can anticipate what we're going to be talking about this whole evening. And I also expect this is going to be a conversation that's going to be going on for the next few days at the very least.
And we have, in the course of a full day's conversation with a lot of people, we've learned a lot of things that may sound quite new to a lot of people about former President Benigno Aquino III. Marami ring mga hindi na pag-uusapan dati na biglang napag-uusapan ngayon.
Kaya nga,
the working style, the personality, the performance, and so on down the line.
And those are the kinds of things we'll start to get into by way of also examining the legacy of former President Noynoy Aquino. Let's start right now with Sorsogon Governor Francis Chis Escudero. Good evening, Senator. Governor.
Governor. Robbie, magandang gabi sa iyo. Kay Ed, magandang gabi sa televiewers ng The Chiefs. Magandang gabi po sa inyo at pagbati mula sa aming lalawigan.
And Gov, and I think our audience and you will forgive me for calling you Senator. You, in fact, did know the former president as a colleague in the Senate. Of course, we're inviting people here to give us insights. I want to start on the big picture, if you don't mind. But starting with everybody's tidbits, because like you, tinitingnan ko yung social media ko, ang daming nagpo-post ganito yung tono. I didn't vote for him, but I respect him, I saw what he did. And then even among his supporters, they would say, hindi siya perfecto, pero alam ko kung anong inilaan niya. Everybody seemed to qualify, but at the end of it, everybody also seemed to say, pero alam ko ang sakripisyo niya. The sister said, Noy, mission accomplished. From your perspective, sir, how do you think people appreciate him now? How will history judge him? And what was that mission, do you think, even to him?
Maraming katanungan, Robbie. Ilang bagay lamang. Kagabi nagsalita ako sa necrological service ng isa sa mga malalapit kong kaibigan at katrabaho dito sa Sorsogon na pumanaw dahil sa COVID. At ang sinabi ko nga doon, bakit nga ba tuwing namamatay ang tao, doon lamang tayo nakakapagbitiw ng mga magagandang salita tungkol sa kanya? Doon lamang tayo nagsasabing mahal kita, pahingi ng tawad, doon lamang natin pinupuri. Samantalang napakahaba ng oras natin para gawin yon. Habang nabubuhay pa sana siya, para mismo siya ang makarinig at hindi yung mga kapamilya at mahal lang niya sa buhay. Pero maging ganun pa man, ika nga nila, pag pumanaw ang isang tao, hindi ugali ng Pilipino na magbitiw ng maanghang na salita sa isang taong pumanaw. Lalo na isang tao na sa pagkakakilala ko ay napakabait, mapagpakumbaba at napaka-simple. Kung ang pag-uusapan natin legasiya ni Pangulo Aquino at ano yung mission accomplished, hindi niya ninais Robbie tumakbo bilang Pangulo, kung maalala mo noong 2010. Meron lamang siya mga tsinelas, sapatos na kailangan punuan dahil ang apelido niya ay Aquino at anak siya ni Ninoy, anak siya ni dating Pangulong Corazon Aquino. Kung rason kung bakit napunta siya sa isang lugar na hindi niya inisip, pinangarap o pinlano, nagampanan niya yung tungkulin na yun sa pamamagitan ng pagpapatuloy ng pangalan ng kanilang pamilya. Gayon din, pangangasiwa sa isang pamahalaan na sa abot ng kanyang makakaya ay inayos niya at ginawang matuwid.
Gob, if I remember correctly po, magkasama kayo ni Noynoy sa Kongreso from 1998 hanggang 1998 hanggang 2007, tapos sa Senado noong 2007 and for the next 2 years after that. At magkaibigan kayo. I don't know kung pareho kayong Spice Boys kayo, di ba? Si Noynoy yata hindi nag-Spice Boys eh.
Hindi.
So, I bring it up kasi, hindi ba? Hindi ba? I bring it up kasi, I'd like to ask you, about the Noynoy that we barely know of or barely heard of during that time. What kind of legislator, what kind of a worker was he? I mean, you were together all the time eh.
Tama kaya sabay kami pumasok sa Kongreso, unang term namin congressman noong 1998. Sabay din kami tumakbo sa pagka-senador noong 2007. Kasabay ko rin siya sa pagtakbo niya bilang Pangulo noong 2010. Isa ako sa mga sumuporta sa kanya noong panahon yon. Bilang legislador, bilang miyembro ng Kamara at ng Senado, seryoso at dedikado maprinsipyo. Mahirap mabali yung paningin at pananaw niya sa isang bagay, maski sino pa ang lumapit. Ang nakakatawang bahagi lang siguro niyan, ay alam mo, naging magkaibigan at nagkakilala kami ni Noynoy habang nagyoyosi noon.
Habang nagyoyosi.
Alalahanin mo, anak ni Cory at ni Ninoy, si Noynoy. Ako naman ay anak ng ministro ni Marcos.
Agriculture.
Maraming nagsasabi na parang hindi kayo bagay na palaging magkasama. Pero hindi naging hadlang yon dahil anuman ang ginawa o hindi ginawa ng aming mga magulang, hindi naging hadlang para magkaroon kami ng pagkakaibigan at relasyon sa kabila ng kasaysayan yun.
Ay, Gov, I mean, doon sa sundutin ko lang yun because bukod, hindi lang po kayo na anak ng isang ministro, pagdating niya sa Senado, pagdating niya sa Kongreso, ultimong mga anak ng dating diktador, kailangan niyang pakisamahan. I mean, anong approach ni Pinoy doon? Anong mentality niya pagka nakasama niya sa isang chamber, sa isang kwarto, kailangan mag-usap? How does he approach what we presume should have been awkward situations, but now even Amy Marcos is saying na no, he had a way to work with us?
He never went out of his way in order to banter with either Bongbong or Amy. Pero maging ganun pa man, kapag kailangan o panawagan ng trabaho at ng tungkulin, hindi siya nagdadalawang isip na kausapin, kumausap, lumapit, tungkol nga lang sa trabaho. Ika nga nila, Robbie, hindi naman kailangan maging mag-best friend ng mga magkatrabaho. Kailangan lang kaya niyong isang tabi, anumang hindi niyong pagkakaunawaan, para makapagtrabaho kayo tungo sa isang direksyon para sa ating bansa, para sa ating mga kababayan.
Yung isa pa, baka may personal insight kayo because, I think Noynoy Aquino is one of the few politicians that people will grant and people will believe nung sinasabi niyang ayoko maging presidente. I mean, nowadays, especially election season, lahat ng magsabing kakausapin ko kayo para sabihin ayoko maging presidente at ayoko tumakbo, automatically people will assume, ibig sabihin niyan, tatakbo yan. But when in the time of Pinoy, and even when he was already president, I think people granted that to be true, that he really did not want to be, he did not ask for it, he did not plan on it. Do you have insights on that period of his life nung inuudyukan siya at kasama na kayo doon na naguhudyat sa kanya, sige, I mean, go for it.
Actually, hindi ako isa sa mga umuudyok sa kanya noon, Robbie. Noong mga panahon yon, pinag-iisipan ko rin kung tatakbo ako. At noong mga panahon yon, ang kandidato ng Liberal Party na inendorso na ni Noynoy ay si Secretary Rojas.
Marojas.
Doon siya naiipit, doon siya pinakaipit, at doon siya tila nabibigatang pa siya noong mga panahon yon. Nabagaman napakarami ng tao na nanawagan sa kanyang pagkandidato at pagtakbo, hindi niya lubos at ubos maisip kung paano niya sasabihin, kakausapin, at papaliwanag kay dating kalihim na Secretary Rojas yung nangyayari na tila may mga supportadores din siya noon, si Secretary Rojas, na iba naman din yung paniniwala. In that sense, I saw a gentleman in him na in spite and despite the clamor, in spite and despite perhaps the ambition and dreams of other people to become president, he put more value in that, in their friendship, in his friendship and relationship with Mar and his party.
Well, Gov, how did you resolve that? Well, of course, we know how we know in the end what he did. Nag-usap sila ni Mar at he of course he agreed to Mar agreed to step down to the presidential race. We all know that. Pero how did he resolve the conflict within himself?
To be fair to Secretary Mar, Ed, I was with Noynoy in the Senate when Secretary Mar scheduled a press conference at Club Filipino, if you remember. And Noynoy had no idea he was going to call a press conference and had no idea what he was going to say. I remember that vividly because he asked me to take his place in sponsoring and defending a bill that he was supposed to defend that afternoon.
Okay.
Because according to him, he had to rush to Club Filipino to be able to talk to talk to Mar. Hopefully before, pero hindi siya umabot siya nung natapos na yung talumpati. At sinabi na nga ni Mar na magbibigay daan siya para kay Noynoy. So, hindi rin naman pinahirapan, hindi rin naman siya nahirapan ng sitwasyon yan dahil nagbigay daan si Secretary Ross para sa kanya.
I do remember that. I was there in Club Filipino covering that, and they drove away with Mar. I remember right. Mar was the one driving.
I think Noynoy was the one driving.
Noynoy was the one driving. Okay.
Yes.
So many years ago. Yeah. Well, but at least I got half of it right.
But
There were only two of them in the car. Noynoy was driving. His old Pajero, I think.
Yes. Yeah. It was an TV. Yes, sir.
outside of politics, how else did you know him? I mean, in what aspects do you feel privileged to say I knew him in this way that other people did not?
I'm not privileged. I don't feel privileged, Robbie. In fact, I feel awkward given the fact that the family is chosen to keep private. But to answer your question, kinuha ko siyang ninong ng dalawang anak ko nung congressman pa lamang kami. At nung kinasal kami ni Hart, siya yung kinuha ko din na best man ng kasal ko. Hindi nga lang siya nakadalo dahil may problema yata nung panahon yun. Kung tama ang recollection ko rin, yun yung tungkol sa SAF 44 na nangyari. Yung sa Mama Sapano, na inunawa naman namin at nag-usap na lamang kami at nagkita pagkatapos namin.
But talk about that. Unfortunately, that is one of the biggest things, if not the biggest things. That was a defining moment heading into the next elections, heading into Maro has his own run for the presidency. Talk about Mama Sapano and how that affected not only his term, but how people are now trying to put a holistic framing of what Pinoy stood for.
That would be, I would say, Robbie, unfair to say the least. To use that as the benchmark for his administration as the seemingly bottomless pit of his administration, because nobody wanted that to happen. Not Noynoy, not Mar, no one, not even the commanders of the SAF, not even at that time General Purisima. I don't think anybody wanted it. It just happened to be that way, given some errors, given some lapses, given some misjudgments by some of the officials at that time. But I guess it was an unfortunate event. But I don't think you can accuse anyone of actually planning it along those lines for the outcome to be that way. And actually not caring enough not to have done something if they only knew the actual situation on the ground.
On the other side of it, one of the last things that people will, of course, credit to Pinoy is taking China to the international court with regards to our dispute in the South China Sea and the West Philippine Sea. Talk about that. I mean, do you think Pinoy gets enough credit and enough acknowledgement for what he did there?
Yes, Robbie, but I think that would be a totally separate discussion because it had so many impacts. Although, for example, on the one hand, and I'm talking politically now, not necessarily as a legacy of the previous administration, although it had an impact insofar as a favorable ruling being granted to the Philippines, it also alienated some of our ASEAN allies because they themselves were claimants to these islands. You have to remember, it's not only China that the ruling was against, it's actually against the other ASEAN countries having a claim in these waters, in these islands. Perhaps one of the main reasons, I don't have any first-hand knowledge, perhaps one of the reasons why it's quite difficult to take the ruling up before and within ASEAN and for ASEAN to support the Philippines in regard to that ruling. But having said that, it took a lot of courage for any sitting president to go against any superpower. And that often by itself should be praised because he did not shun the fact that he was going up against one of the two major or three major superpowers in the world. And we are just, quote unquote, the Philippines trying to do this against them.
Sir, it's been said that Aquino would consult you even on an unofficial capacity during his presidency. From your recollection, what issue did he have the most difficulty with during his presidency? Kumbaga, what issue conflicted him the most, made it the most difficult for him to make a decision? Kumbaga, saan siya talaga nahirapan?
Madalas, Ed, ako ang nagbibigay sa kanya ng pananaw at opinion ko at hindi siya nagtatanong sa akin kaugnay sa gagawin o hindi niya gagawin sa trabaho niya. Kung may konsultasyon mang tatanungin o gagawin siya sa akin, yun ay tungkol sa mga personal na bagay. Tulad ng pag-ibig o mga ganong paksa, pero hindi tungkol sa hindi tungkol sa trabaho. Dahil tandaan natin, Pangulo siya ng bansa, mas marami siyang impormasyon na hawak at binibigay kumpara sa akin o na miyembro lamang ng Senado. Pero hindi rin ako nagdadalawang isip sabihin sa kanya kung anong pananaw at naiisipan ko kaugnay sa mga bagay-bagay para malaya niyang matimbang yung mga opinion na yun, kontra at laban dun sa opinion na binibigay sa kanya at informasyon na binibigay naman sa kanya ng iba.
Sir, kung gano'n, maaari namin kayong tanongin tungkol sa pag-ibig niya.
Huwag na.
Biro lang, sir, biro lang.
But how was he? But how was he in taking, let's say, even unsolicited advice? I mean, sa totoo lang naman, may reputasyon si Pinoy na, very, very isolated, very masungit sa ibang tao. He didn't, people, that's their impression of him. Is that an accurate impression? How does he take it when people give him unsolicited advice?
Robbie, hindi lang siguro nila kilala, hindi lang siguro ganun yung relasyon nila, kaya ang tingin nila, sinusungitan, tinatarayan. Ang simpleng paliwanag ko lang doon, na nakita ko rin ginawa sa akin ng ilang ulit, hindi katarayan ang pagkakaroon ng ibang pananaw sa pananaw mo. Hindi pagiging galit o mahirap lapitan, ang pagkakaroon ng pananaw ng Pangulo na iba sa sinusulong mo. Dahil gaya ng sinabi ko, pag may paninindigan at paniniwala siya, mahirap nang baliin yon. Napakahirap sa totoo lang. Lalo na kung nakabase yon sa alam niyang mga facts at katotohanan na nakatanggap o nabigay na rin sa kanya.
Gob, if I may, one more question po.
Yes, Ed.
There's been a lot said about Noy Noy from a lot of quarters, especially after Mama Sapa, no? Among the criticisms hurled against him was that parang wala raw siya masyadong empathy or hindi siya ganun ka-sensitive to the public. I mean, as somebody who's been close to him, who he consults on personal matters, what is it that people don't know about Noynoy Aquino? Was that an accurate description? That description that's been going around since 2015, 2014?
Well, I think it's unfair to say that he lacked empathy. It's more the fact that he felt bad about what happened. That he could have done more, so he thought or felt, to actually prevent that situation from happening. The Senate at that time, Ed Robbie, investigated the Mama Sapano massacre, and we heard firsthand from everyone involved exactly what happened. In fact, I had a 2.5 hour conversation at that time with President Aquino, where he was explaining his side, and I was telling him, "You don't have to tell me this. I mean, you don't owe this to me." But he said he wanted to get it out of his chest. I think it's more a feeling of remorse of the fact that he could have done something more. He could have prevented it or avoided it. It was a kind of feeling that he wanted to, as much as possible, forget about it because he himself felt bad about it. But I guess people saw it as absence or lack of empathy. I cannot blame them, but neither can they judge the person, especially given the fact that he is the commander-in-chief of all the uniformed and armed services of the country. He is ultimately responsible for them. Parang siya yung ama, tumatay yung ama at yung mga sundalo at pulis ay yung tumatay yung mga anak niya. Kaya naging mabigat yun para sa kanya at dinala niya yun sa mahabang panahon.
Okay. Sorsogon Governor Francis Chis Escudero. Maraming salamat po, Governor.
Thank you, sir.
Robbie, maraming
Ingat po.
salamat Ed. Maraming salamat. Magandang gabi sa inyo.
And now joining us is Albay 2nd District Representative Joey Salceda. Good evening, Congressman.
Hi, sir.
Hi, good
Magandang
evening.
gabi po.
Good evening.
Good evening. Hey, Congressman, we obviously we're talking about the legacy and the work and how people will remember Pinoy. Seeing as you're here, let's take the perspective on the economy. What to you is something that you would remind the public? It clearly should be a legacy credited to the Aquino administration.
Kasi pagdating kung growth rate lang, I think yung average GDP growth rate niya 6.2. So I think that would be the highest among many administrations. Yung inflation rate doon 1.8%. He was able to lift 7.7 million people out of poverty. Increased the 4Ps, did not rename it from the 800,000 of President Gloria to about 4.4 million, and then the budget increased from 5 billion to essentially about 70 billion.
70
so
billion.
that's large. And di man siya kuripot, but he was fiscally very prudent. 2 years, 2014, 2015, 1 year before election, his deficit was only virtually balanced budget. You know, you would expect na ang hirap-hirap kaya na yung to name your successor and make him win in this country. Kahit si Ramos hindi nagawa. So he was able to achieve those low deficit of virtually, I think on the average about 2%, and he did not increase taxes except for the biggest sin tax. Ironically, he was a smoker, but he imposed. So he was able to increase his tax to GDP, which to me as an economist or from political economy perspective, the capacity of the state is essentially measured by your ability to raise revenue. So he was able to increase it from 12.9 to about 14.2, 14.5. So ang taas po nun. It's quite a big jump. Kung hindi ka nag-raise ng tax, saan nanggaling? Nanggaling yun sa collection, DIR customs. So basically, ang bottom line, we were able to reduce the tax gap by about 452 billion, arising from smuggling as well as from tax evasion. So he was able to collect taxes without increase the tax to GDP, without raising taxes, but essentially improving tax collection efficiency. So saan niya dinala? Yun nga, unang-una, 4Ps will always be remembered for him, about him. The second one is also governance related, which is the bottoms-up budgeting. That there's congressional control of the usual political patronage, but he was able to basically provide more resources for communities themselves who know their needs and implement their own projects. So he was able, from other indicators, sa Economic Freedom Index, when he became president, we were ranked about 115. When he left, we were 70. Our global competitiveness virtually increased from being number 85 to number 47. That's quite a lot. Enabling trade index, openness to the world, essentially from number 92 to 64. So there's quite a no. The other one is in education. He will be remembered for K to 12, although he rampaged it. So that's why we're facing all this after in 2013. So the supposed gains are not materializing. Instead, we're facing a lot of difficulties. He built 90,000 classrooms, and I think he hired 170,000 teachers. So pag
Yes, sir.
nakita mo, raised taxes without raising taxes, raised revenues
Revenue
without
without
raising
raising.
taxes, governance, and then with the revenues, he put it essentially in the social expenditure while keeping the deficit
Sir,
deficit.
sir, you did mention fiscal prudence on the part of former President Aquino, but at the same time, he was also notoriously criticized for underspending for several years. Nakailang taon din na binabalik yung pera na dapat nagastos for critical spending back to the treasury. I'm wondering how should we view this?
Political economy doctrine. Kung ingat na ingat, so hindi ka gagastos kasi takot ka na manakaw yun. So parang virtually puritanically couldn't hindi
Puritanically
siya...
prudent.
Ang ibig kong sabihin, parang there's no tolerance for corruption basically. Kaya nga, yung 4Ps, paano mo naman makokorrupt yun? Tapos yung BUB, nireduce mo nga yung usual corruption with public works projects by giving it essentially to the barangays to do it themselves.
Yes, sir.
And hindi lang barangay. In-exclude niya doon yung kapitan, nagpagawa ka ng sarili pong mga community-based organizations to do it. So, sa education, so pag tinignan mo yung niya, ang pumutok kasi di ba na-increase niya yung tax to GDP from 12.9 to 14.5, pero the deficit was kept at below 2% and virtually balanced in the last 2 years. So pag tinignan mo, kinalkal mo, ang lumaki talaga sa kanya ay social expenditure, which means investment in human capital rather than physical capital. I think it is, ang problema lang talaga, it will probably be said that, and quite reasonably, justifiably, na nag-iwan siya ng 1.4 trillion, hindi niya ginastos. So kung nasabayan sana niya yung competitiveness natin, kasi number one sa pinaka wide investors, aside from, of course, predictability of policy, is essentially crumbling infrastructure.
Yeah, infrastructure.
So, pag yan sa national government level, pag sinama mo pa yung consolidated public sector fiscal, actually positive siya all throughout his 6 years because he created the GCG to essentially restrain or control the GOCCs. So, again, kung dun sa level na yun, sayang din yung pera.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, sir, very quickly, sir, let me just bring this in. I do remember during that time, the PCIJ interviewed Babe Singson, yung Secretary ng Public Works, and he was saying that the reason why they were underspending was because they were still busy trying to put in place the mechanisms to prevent or deter corruption in the DPWH. Kasi, the DPWH had always been notorious for, for deals left and right
Tama
and
yun.
money making.
Kaya nga ngayon, you don't hear a lot of this because of the what Singson left in terms of the mechanisms that were I forgot the name of that standard pricing cost unit that he implemented. BUP ba yun? I forgot. So
Meron siyang listahan ng how much things should cost.
yeah, how
going
far
down
it
the
can
line.
go up, how far it
The
will
range.
go. Yes. So, ang isa pa, kasi nga, ewan ko wala siyang tiwala sa political goods. Ang ginamit niya, private-public partnerships. Doon siya, well, the new administration, of course, is not very keen on that. Virtually yung mga expressway. So, there's an entire Philippine PPP program, and you can read it. He was able to develop quite a mechanism. Sayang nga hindi ginamit. Ang isa pa although people remember him for what happened in Tacloban during the Yolanda, I don't know, it's more personality based impression or event. But actually, Will be well known for DRRCCA. Unang-una, he implemented one of the most successful mechanisms for reducing risk, for disaster response, which is called Project NOAA.
Yes.
Which has to go to UP, yung UPRI. It helped Albay achieve zero casualty for a long time because it was actually all the whole ang worldview niya ay actually mahilig sa numero yun eh. Hindi ko siya kaibigan ng classmate ko siya sa Ateneo. Teacher namin si Gloria, probably in history is the only student to replace his own teacher. Pero kasi siyempre martial law yun. Nung nasa house naman kami, hindi naman kami masyadong nakapag-interact. It was only when he was president and I was provincial governor where we had a lot of contacts, it's probably second to President Gloria. Is accessible actually to governors in terms of being able to bring your concerns. Tapos, pagdating sa climate change, he came here and in fact, the Philippines was well known under him for negotiating very quite, inikilala tayo sa buong mundo pagdating sa United Nations Framework for Climate Change Convention. And with his support, I became the first Asian chairman of the Green Climate Fund, which is the financing instrument of the entire climate change. So I would say na I would rather kasi it's easy for everyone to enumerate na nobody's perfect, but I would still that he had a very good administration. The only thing that I will probably as an economist would sinayang niya yung pagkakataon na may tiwala sa gobyerno ng tao tapos hindi niya ginamit para i-ramp up yung infrastructure.
Yung spending.
Kasi may pera, inuna niya talaga yung mga social expenditures. Essentially, lalong-lalo na yung 4 Ps from 5 to 70 billion. Yung BUB from dati wala naman yan, yung mga algo. Ito talagang binigyan niya ng pera yung mga communities para sila magpatakbo ng kanilang yung kanilang sarili pong mga solar dryer or whatever they need. Tapos education, yung K-12, it had to be funded with classrooms kasi you added 2 more years and hired 170,000. And of course, even in health, he was able to modernize my own regional hospital here. And I could say it's comparable to St. Luke's. I had zero debt actually since June in COVID because we had quite a good ano, and then he established the first ano, college of medicine by a state universities in ages, no? So, and that is what I'm thankful, and he fully funded my Bicol International Airport, but that was in 2012. Kaso 2022 matatapos due to for some reasons, I don't know, peace and order, plus of course conflicts in among contractors basically, our
Well, Albay 2nd District Representative Joey Salceda, sir, maraming salamat po.
Sir, maraming salamat po. Ingat po.
The word is governance promotes growth, and growth promotes equity, especially if I think that is the worldview or the belt and song of the entire AQUINO administration. So, not because I was Jesuit trained and he is Jesuit trained, but that basically defines it.
Maraming
Thank
salamat
you.
po.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Please stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back. Welcome back, the Chiefs here on One News. Now joining us is Senator Kiko Pangilinan and former presidential spokesperson, Attorney Edwin Lacerda. Good evening, Senator Kiko and Attorney Lacerda.
Good evening.
Yeah.
Good evening, sir.
Attorney Lacerda, I'll start with you, if you don't mind. Obviously, for this whole day, everybody's talking about the legacy of Pinoy. It's a complicated topic. It's something that obviously we can't cover in a few minutes, in an hour or a day, and it's something that obviously will continue and go on. So I actually wanted to start with something more basic. People woke up to this sad news really shocked and surprised. Now, on the one hand, we're not surprised because Pinoy really retreated to private life after he stepped down. At the same time, in the few instances that we saw him in the past, it's no secret, people were talking amongst themselves. Hindi maganda itsura ni Pinoy. maybe just share what you can. We know that the family has asked for privacy, but what you can share, sir, of how long was he suffering? I mean, did we not know this just because of his very strong sense of privacy, or was this in fact a surprise and a shock to everyone, even the people closest to him?
I think after he retired from public office, his health was still in pretty good shape. It was towards, I think, only several years after that that we noticed that he was becoming emaciated. So it turned out to be a function of his diabetes, I think, and then eventually towards complicated. His diabetes affected his kidney, so he went through dialysis, and so eventually his kidneys stopped functioning, and as a result, uh, led to his death, and the cause of death was kidney failure. So, but it's not something that he retired from public service, it wasn't immediate. No, there was no immediate one-to-one correspondence, so that led to his being ill. Over some years, it developed into his diabetes just manifested itself by affecting the kidney. So that's where we noticed he was getting thinner, and he was going to the hospital more often and going in and out of the hospital for this or that reason. But eventually, the body could not take it anymore, and so led to his passing.
But on balance, I mean, really, personal curiosity lang, on balance, would you consider him, did he consider himself a healthy person? I mean, I mean, his habits, in other words, everybody knows he smokes. That's not a secret. On the other hand, kanina binabasa ko yung balita, and we got reminded na, uy, black belt sa karate yan, nagkakarate yan. No? Para meron niyang mga physical activities din. No? But on balance, did he take health seriously and central to his person?
On balance, he had this regular checkup. I think I'm not sure how often it was, but sometimes in the middle of the year, he would have a designated time to have a regular exam. No? We had a family friend of theirs, Dr. Alex Aiko, is in charge of his health. No? But through the 6 years in government, I can tell you, for instance, that it was no secret that he loves to smoke. But also a problem, I found it because I'm a diabetic myself, but I found it quite interesting that he could drink regular Coke. I was already doing Diet Coke because I was a diabetic. And I thought that he never had diabetes all throughout these years. Kasi ang hilig niya uminom talaga ng Coke. Whenever we have a meeting, meron siyang regular Coke. Ako naman, hinihingi ko Diet Coke. No? So, but I thought, wala siyang diabetes kasi tuloy-tuloy pa rin ang pag-inom niya ng regular Coke. But eventually, I suppose the diabetes caught up with him and it affected his health, added to the fact that smoking is really a negative factor. No? It doesn't improve your health. So that's by and large, I would assume that he would be taking his regular exam. But in terms of lifestyle, he was into Coke, he was into smoking.
Okay.
I think that contributed also at such a young age. For me, at 61 now, is no longer considered old.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
new. Yes.
We're not that far from that anymore. Eh.
Right.
Well, at least Robbie's not. And iba talaga yung tawag ng regular Coke, but that's another thing altogether. Senator Kiko, I'd like to ask you naman po, kasi, well, he retired somewhat from politics after 2016. But it's kind of hard to imagine that Pinoy would have isolated himself or insulated himself completely from the concerns of the party or the issues of the party, especially with 2022 just over the horizon. I'm wondering if the party would still consult him or if he would still advise the party on current concerns.
Now, he would be updated. He would be briefed. In fact, Teddy Bagilat, former congressman, who's our vice chairman, one of our vice chairpersons, just recently briefed him on what we were doing and our preparations.
Oh,
But
no
of
Tuesday
course-
daw, sabi ni Teddy.
Yes. So, but we were also careful because precisely when his health started to falter, we didn't want to add to his pressure and stress. His health started going south just before COVID. He was hospitalized, and from there we became very, particular about adding additional stress to him. And yes, we also were informed about his regular dialysis. So, hindi na namin siya inabala pa
Inabala.
unless informing him and updating him, because we wanted to really shield him and have him focus on getting better and recovering.
Oh, but Senator, marami akong kilalang mga nagkasakit na ayaw nating abalahin pero sila nangaabala. I mean, was Pinoy that kind of a person also and that kind of a leader? Siya ba nangaabala sa inyo? Meron ba siyang mga particular questions, particular concerns that he remained active with and at least was trying to actively keep track of?
He never interfered, let's put it that way, but he would, be upfront when he had some concerns. He would relay it, have it relayed to us. We would sit down, we would meet, we would have meetings in Time Street, and listen to him and get his wise counsel. So yeah, he would not interfere, but when there were issues that he felt strongly about, he would provide feedback. Let's put it that way.
And I guess that's my question. What were I mean, not the specifics, but what were the themes that remained very close to his heart in his final months?
Well, in his final months, we were no longer really sharing party matters directly with him. I mean, meaning, it was just updating him. But with respect to issues that were affecting the nation, we really made a point na wag na natin siyang let him focus on getting well. We really wanted him to recover, of course, and we really wanted him to get better. We knew he was going through dialysis, and the stress. He didn't need more stress. But in the 2019 elections, for example, medyo mainit yung mga diskusyon. The coalition building, doon mainit din ang diskusyon. Who were to be part of the coalition? How was the communication strategy? We had discussions with him, also with Monjay, the late Mon Jimenez. It was a lively discussion. So, but that was because he was still strong then. His health was, he was fine until precisely that after the elections, and then that hospitalization. That's when it really, took. He was really health-wise, compromised after that.
Mm-hmm. Well, sir, any of the two of you, I was looking at the numbers kasi, at least yung satisfaction ratings ng SWS dun sa last quarters ng nakaraang mga administrasyon. And relatively speaking, Pinoy ended on a very high note. The SWS survey for June 2016, just before he stepped down, put him at 50% net satisfaction rating compared to GMA with -45, ERAP with +2, FBR with +9, and AQUINO with -5. So he had among the highest. He had the highest satisfaction rating of his time as a president stepping down. I'm wondering lang what you think of what happened in the succeeding months after that. Kasi parang sabi nga kanina in some of the interviews, parang biglang nagbago yung ihip ng hangin after these surveys were taken. Kasi by the third or fourth quarter of 2016, parang umiba yung timpla.
Well, there was endless demonization on social media. There was organized, orchestrated trolling of the Aquino legacy and his accomplishments. The mantra of lies were repeated over and over again, reaching tens of millions of subscribers. So it's bound to affect precisely his legacy, and that took a toll precisely. Yung ganung relentless undermining of the Aquino brand and what he contributed and his sacrifices. Diba? Ano yun?
hindi naman open secret yun. In fact, noong 2019 elections, di ba, yung UP College of Mass Communication, where Ed is a graduate, di ba? Robbie Renata, di ba?
No, kaming apat actually.
Lahat kami
Lahat
sa
ng
the
chiefs
chiefs.
actually.
Ayun pala, it came out with a research paper on the trolling
Yeah,
of the
yeah, I
2019
remember that.
elections. Yeah,
By Nicole Curato and ano.
yeah, number one, by I don't know, by 1,000 miles ata yung lamang ng Ocho Derecho sa trolling eh. In terms of and then of the candidates, it was Bam and Mar who were really the biggest, the most trolled. And this is interesting. Sabi ko nga, 1 month after the elections, I met up with Bam, and he said, you know what, guess what? Today, I'm still posting and nobody's trolling. Zero, he said. And that's what they did from day one, these trolls kay President Aquino. They really bombarded daily YouTube, and undermining all the fake news.
Yeah.
Walang ginawa, mamasap, the funds, the Yolanda funds were stolen, which repeatedly, obviously, this has been debunked by mainstream media. But
Because they were still used in Marawi.
yes,
Umabot pa ng Marawi.
exactly, and that's why the lies repeated over and over again, and spread toward reaching tens of millions. Will really have an impact.
Speaking of these of social media and trolls, Secretary Lacerda, we don't have that much time left. But as we said, we're sure that these conversations will continue in the coming days. Speaking of social media, if you look at it today, right at this moment, it's a sort of it's a unique moment right now because relatively speaking, tahimik ang social media ngayon. Not to deny that there are people still trolling on Mama Sapano, there are people trolling on Yolanda, but by and large, from social media, for that matter, all the way to Malacanang, tributes have been pouring in, and people are allowing themselves time to reflect on the legacy, which is not easy to do. In the moment that we have left, how do you think people should not only remember but use this moment to practice? How do we assess the legacy of a person?
I think when you, especially at this time of death, normally a person is recalled in fun terms. It would be impolite to speak ill of someone who just recently passed away. And so that's where you see, for instance, a nostalgia surrounding the death of President Cory Aquino. It's the same thing that we're experiencing right now. It's a nostalgia surrounding the death of President Aquino, whose style of governance is vastly different from the present administration. So there's bound and inevitable to be a comparison between the two kinds of governance. No? And so people are now realizing what happened during the Aquino administration, the achievements that they have made, the legacy left behind by President Aquino in terms of fighting with China, the GDP, the investment ratings grade, the CCT program. So all these things are being recalled, and like what Sen Kiko said, are slowly coming out, and also at the same time, the truth of the work that President Aquino did for the country is coming to fore again once more, because of the respect for the recent passing of President Aquino. The trolls are forced to step back. And so this is an opportune time for people to really just share their fond memories of the president, his accomplishments, untrolled by his political foes. And this is where people should really recall the truth of the matter. And we can discuss about Mama Sapano, we can discuss about Typhoon Yolanda in objective terms. Social media has, the one thing that social media has done was it has erased the one source of truth, which was previously held by traditional media. So you've got so many sources of truth that people will go to the most spread social media page. So regardless of whether it's a source of truth or not. But right now, because of the recent passing of a former president, we can now see the truth that is coming out from all sides, from social media, from traditional media, and from broadcast media as well. So this is a good time to really just present the president in what he did in the last in the 6 years that he was president, and hopefully that will bear fruit in terms of appreciating his role in history.
I think another, if I may add, no, now that the former president is gone, then we no longer have to think of him in terms of what would he say if we start talking about how successful or at least the successes of his administration. Kasi si Presidente mismo, I mean, Presidente Noynoy mismo ang ayaw pag-usapan eh. He does not want to call attention to himself. Ayaw niyang magbuhat ng sarili niyang bangko. And in that way, we were also all, teka muna, di ba? While we wanted to go all out, he was the one who would say, bawal ang ipal, etc. and all that, But now that he's gone, now we are speaking about, and binabalikan yung ano ba ang nagawa niya, ano ba yung legacy niya, yun. So we're now free to speak without fear na he will, tell us, oy, masyado yung inaano ito, wag dito, itong dapat gawin. So maybe it also helps, no? Now, his style of not wanting to announce or talk about his achievements, we are now free of that too. As his former cabinet members and his allies, di ba? Pwede na. We can talk about it. We can proclaim it even without fearing na he will feel uncomfortable, because he was always uncomfortable, di ba, Edwin?
Right.
Ayaw niya, to a fault. Ayaw niya. Kasi nga, ganun ng, parang ano niya na mas importante yung iba. Mas importante, hindi tayo. Inuuna niya lagi yung iba. Hinuhuli niya yung sarili niya. And to a fault. Kaya nga hindi niya, in a way, hindi na niya inalagaan ng husto yung sarili niya dahil iba-ibang inuuna niya, iniisip yung iba.
Okay. Former Secretary Edwin Cerda and Senator Kiko Pangilinan, maraming salamat po. At sana po maipaabot niyo rin po sa buong angkan ng mga Aquino ang aming pakikiramay.
Maraming salamat. Magandang gabi. Thank you.
Thank you po.
Ingat lahat. Stay
Ingat po.
safe.
Thank you.
And that will be all for this edition of The Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. Before we go, a reminder to our viewers, mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. Ako po si Robbie Alampay.
Ako po si Ed Lingao at kami po ang One News.